You're listening to the Word Slinger Podcast, episode 90, Rural Fantasy with Tex Thompson.
Writing a book. It can be the best way to build or grow your business, or to simply tell the story that you wish to tell. Learn how to write your book in 30 days or less. Pick up 30-day offer today from Amazon, Apple iBooks, or other online retailers.
It's the Word Slinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented Pants Optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Word Slinger.
Word Slinger.
Ha ha ha, happy anniversary. Ha ha ha, happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. Ha ha ha, happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. I wish to you happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. This special day, I'm happy with you. Let's celebrate a happy anniversary. Ha ha ha, happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. I wish to you happy anniversary. Happy anniversary.
Whoa, you okay there? Good. Hey everybody, this is Kevin Thompson, the Word Slinger, and you may have figured it out by now, but this is a special anniversary episode of the Word Slinger Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you have been a listener from the start, first of all, you're amazing. Also a liar, because I know for the first handful of episodes, I actually didn't have any listeners, but I appreciate you playing along, and I appreciate you coming along when you did. I am incredibly grateful to the people who are responsible for this show becoming what it has become, and that includes, the listeners. It also includes the guests. I've had some really incredible people on this show over the past couple of years, and I have learned so much from them, and I hope you've learned a lot from them as well. I've had a variety of folks. I don't just interview authors. I don't just interview entrepreneurs. I interview people who have a real story to share, who have something to contribute to the world and want you to not only hear their message, but be inspired by it. And I couldn't have done any of this without you, the listener, without them, the guest, without a whole bunch of people who work in the background, actually. I got a lot of friends who chip in and help me out. They help me find guests. They help me, they initially helped me figure out how to just do the podcast because, I did have a radio background, but I didn't know the first thing about doing a podcast for a while there. And so I had a lot of people, including Nick Thacker, who helped me figure out how to do this. So I want to just express my gratitude toward all of you, my love toward all of you. I really appreciate what you've helped this show to become. And I'm looking forward to years of this show, honestly. I'm looking forward to where we go next. I want to continue to grow this because here's what's funny. I've had some incredible opportunities come my way because of this podcast. Almost entirely because of this podcast and because of the connections I've made through the show, because of the things I've learned because of the show. And, that's that right there is enough of a reason to do it. That's why you don't really hear me push. For a while there, I was pushing, trying to get a lot of donations. I still wouldn't mind that. I could use some financial help with the show every now and then, and I do appreciate the people who are contributing on Patreon. If you would like to do that, of course you can go to wordslingerpodcast.com and click that Patreon logo, and you can chip in. It's not really something I push that much anymore because I'm right now I see this show as sort of a gift that I give not just to you guys but to myself. After I had a little moment of reflection first and then realization that because of this show I've grown so much over the past couple of years. This is the second anniversary, okay? So we're 2 years in on the Word Slinger podcast. Feels longer at times and shorter at times, but we're 2 years in, and I've gotten so much out of the experience that I never thought I would get. The show became something different than what it started for me. really, it's hard to even say what I wanted to be when I started. I discovered the show as we went, which is pretty appropriate considering I'm a discovery author. So, but I'm kind of floored. I'm kind of amazed at all the goodwill that comes to me from people who listen. You who subscribe, you're amazing. You who have left reviews, also amazing. As a matter of fact, speaking of reviews, I have 2 new reviews here from iTunes, and I'm going to read them out loud because I really appreciate what you guys are out there doing and saying, and I want to encourage anyone who is listening to the show to do the same and go on iTunes and rate and rank the show. It really helps, so I appreciate it. So the first review, this comes from I'm sorry, I missed the name. Okay, this comes from Chasing Rockets from the USA. Kevin delivers a great podcast that is informative, funny, and from the heart. I've enjoyed listening to it over the past few months. I would recommend it to anyone who writes or is considering writing. If you listen to podcasts about writing, don't miss out on this one. Thanks, Chasing Rockets. I really appreciate that. And, writing is a passion of mine. Publishing is a passion of mine. I try to do something, I do something with this show that's a little different than other podcasts on the topic, because it's not specifically a writing podcast, but it is geared a lot towards writers and authors, because that's what I am. There's a distinction between writers and authors, and also towards entrepreneurs, which I also am. So I'm glad that it's out there making some kind of impression on people and helping people. That's the point. So thanks so much for that review. Now this next review comes from, and I'm going to, it's not a name, so it's Jkor, Jkor 72, also from the USA. Got turned on to Kevin via guest host for Johnny Shonenday's podcast. Wordslinger is a very informative and entertaining in its content, where Kevin shares his personal experiences and expertise in independent publishing. Although he conducts interviews with the latest authors who make their rounds in the podcast arena, his questions delve deeper into the guests' personal reasons for doing what they do, and I find that part to be the most insightful and inspiring. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Jcore72, and I appreciate that, because that is kind of the goal here. I don't ask the same questions everyone asks. I do have a lot of the same guests as Johnny, Sean, and Dave, for example. That's the self-publishing podcast. They're just folks who make the rounds, and I'm one of those folks, by the way. You're probably hearing me on all those podcasts. I've been on the self-publishing podcast twice now, so we do get a lot of the same guests. But where I try to, I guess, make the show different, in its way, is I'm looking for the story of the person, not just their career, not just the work that they have or what they're trying to promote. I want them to have the opportunity to do that, to promote their work, because that's why they're here, right? We want to support artists. We want to support entrepreneurs. But the idea is that I want to provide a place where you can come and hear the story of someone's life, so that you can be inspired and take something from that, make it a seed in your life, grow a career that's brilliant and a life that's brilliant out of that. So that's the goal. It sounds like I'm getting there. So, oh, by the way, I didn't read the title of that one. It was Plethora of Knowledge, which I appreciate. I love the word plethora. That's probably one of my favorite words. So thanks so much for those reviews. If you would be interested in having your review read on air, just go to iTunes, look up the Wordslinger podcast. Just type Wordslinger podcast. You can also type my name, but that's going to bring up a lot of podcasts these days. So go look up Wordslinger podcast. And when you find it, go in there and rate and review it. I would love 4 or 5 stars. 5 stars would be awesome. But the written review itself is kind of cool. So if you do that, I get a little notification whenever someone does it. I have an app that goes out and searches for those. They may not come exactly after the review is written, but they do come, and I get so much joy out of hearing what people think of the show and what I'm doing. So I appreciate that from a personal level, but I also think that it helps other people discover the show and discover it as something that might be helpful to them in their careers and their lives. So you're doing good work. That's the way I see it. So at any rate, thanks so much for all of that. Thanks for being with me for the past 2 years. We're nearly at 10 minutes in, and I want to make sure I get to our guest, because she is amazing. Tex Thompson. We've never met in person. We've kind of been ships passing in the night. We never quite meet up, but we will eventually, Tex, if you're listening. I'm looking forward to it, actually. But you're going to enjoy this interview. Now, Tex and I both kind of do, she does more, but we do the same sorts of circuits for like comic book conventions and that sort of thing, trying to get our work out there. And that's a little bit of what we talk about in this and some other great topics that I think you'll find useful if you're an author especially, but also if you're just someone who's looking to promote their creative work in general. If you're an artist, if you're a musician, if you're, all these fall under the title of artist to me. Authors, musicians, illustrators, whatever, they all fall under artist in my opinion, but also entrepreneur these days, because that's what we're out there doing. We're building businesses around our passions. So you're going to enjoy this interview. I'm not going to delay it any longer. We're well past 10 minutes now. So stick around after the interview for the quick wrap up. And thanks for joining me on this very special 2nd year anniversary of the Wordslinger podcast. See you after the interview. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in, and I am sitting here, well, I'm virtually sitting here. We're about a state of Texas apart from each other right now, but I'm sitting with Tex Thompson, and Tex, Tex is your nom de plume, right? It's not your birth name. But right. I didn't ask you before we started how to pronounce the birth name.
The other name? Yeah. So I graduated from high school as Ariane Thompson. Okay. My parents actually named me after a French rocket. Okay. I narrowly escaped being called Moonbeam. So just go with Tex. It's
No, I'm cool with Tex.
Yeah,
no, that's cool. All right.
It's there for public use.
It fits you because Texas is of course the big state. It's not the largest state in the U.S., but we're working on it. We're gonna claim some territory. But you're a big personality, so that fits you very well. So I didn't finish your whole intro either. Tex is a rural fantasy author, among other things. You've got a lot going on. You're like me. We have a lot of balls in the air. We're constantly juggling, and we're going to talk about some of that. And I'm looking forward to this because you and I, actually, I kind of forget how we initially connected. Do you remember?
Actually, we didn't. I was at Comic Palooza in Houston,
right,
where I did not meet you. But I was talking to a friend of mine, David Young. He publishes as D.L. Young, and I said, okay, so if I needed just some kind of excruciatingly rad self-published or independently published author that I could talk to and have on our program, who would that be? And he said,
Hugh Howey, and then you said.
No, he said, listen, I don't think you're ready for Howie just yet. Why don't we get you Kevin? Kevin's good for you.
Right. I'm always a good second choice. We did not connect. But David, I'm sorry, David. I did not mean to call you Dave. But D.L. Young, he was actually on the show a couple of episodes back for everybody listening. So you'll get to hear that interview. And it was a good one, too. I like him, actually. We sat on a panel together at this last Comic Palooza. Where I finally got to meet him, and we just kind of hit it off. We think in the same vein. So you're out there, you're pushing and promoting. And how many books do you have out available right now?
I've got 2. The first is One Night in Sixes. The second one is called Medicine for the Dead, and the third, Dreams of the Eaten, will be out in December this year, and that'll be the last of the series.
That's a great title, Dreams of the Eaten. Do you want to elaborate on what it is, or?
Oh, sure, yeah. So all three books they're a trilogy that's kind of an epic fantasy western that we might charitably call cowboys and fishmen fantasy. Okay. But the idea is almost it's almost kind of an indigenous, like a Native American Lord of the Rings, where the ring, as it were, is actually a body of a young man who was unjustly killed, and the quest is to get him home and answer for his death before the I guess you could say the forces of spiritual pollution start reanimating everything.
Okay.
So there's some it's good stuff. We've got crows, and we've got rednecks, and we've got kind of gay necromancers. They're cool. Yeah. but it's a good time, and it's an odd duck. So if you're up for something a little out of the a little bit off the beaten track, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, the covers are cool. It reminds me of some of the Louis L'Amour books, that I grew up reading. My grandpa grew up reading, or made me read growing up. It's got that kind of feel to it. So, but it's rural fantasy.
Right.
Yeah.
If you say weird Western, most people think kind of pulpy stuff, Cowboys and Aliens or Jonah Hex. I'm more interested in, I guess you could, like, if you think about, well, what would the Wizard of Oz be if Oz creatures started pouring out into Dust Bowl, Kansas? Or what would the Grapes of Wrath be if it were a story told about a group of migrating giants? It's not a Western with cowboy hats and all that, but it is of the West. It is, fundamentally not a story about kingdoms and castles and cities.
Yeah. And those are interesting concepts, and I kind of love when people take genres and sort of turn them on their head like that. What were some of the influences that made you decide to do this?
Well, I was really excited about writing a book when I was in 11th grade, and I did it, and I was so proud of myself. I'd written my first ever book, and it was so anime. It was just the most terrible garbage, and I didn't care. I loved it. But as I got older and tried revising it, and I realized, why am I writing about medieval European fantasy? I'm not European. I'm Texan. Europe is one syllable for us. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to do epic fantasy based on American history? And that really wrecked everything in the best possible way. Yeah. Because that there is we have this amazing history and this amazing nation, but at the same time, there is no part of our nation that wasn't taken from somebody else, and we're still, that baggage that's a heavy load, and it's one we're still dealing with today. Right. So I really admire Terry Pratchett's Discworld. I love the idea of this big, wild, slightly ruined world where the big war has already come and gone, and the challenge now is to survive the peace. I loved Firefly for the same reasons. I love the idea that we're not the immortal heroes in shining, covering ourselves in glory, but we are trying to make rent. I love that whole aesthetic, and it's one that I really want to do more with.
Yeah, that's very cool. And those are some interesting influences. I mean, that's a diverse list of influences for something that ended up bringing up an American West fantasy series.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's pretty cool, yeah. I have to ask you, because I'm looking at your author page on Amazon right now. Mm-hmm. I have to ask you about the prices. Because it's like $5.38, $8.99, $7.
Okay, my theory is, and I have not asked the publisher yet, but my theory is that I'm published by Solaris, who's an imprint of Rebellion Publishing based in Oxford in the UK. Right. I think what happened is that they put in a $3.99 Kindle price, but they put it in as pounds, and so it's been converted to dollars. We need to get on that.
Yeah, that's funny, and that brings up a good point, because U.S. authors do that to the U.K. all the time. So you have these weird little... I don't know why no one's thought of normalizing pricing for various markets yet. Like, that's something... Now that I'm with Draft to Digital, maybe I'll talk to them about...
I was going to say, if you could actually get on that for us, that would be super.
Hey, look, it's not something... I mean, it's not new. I've brought it up before I ever even had solid connections with Draft to Digital. I'm like, why can't I push a button and all my pricing is automatically converted to something normalized for the region? Yeah. So we'll see. I'm working on it. Okay. I'm brand new there yet right now. I don't have that much pull yet.
I know, but you're the maverick, man. You're like exactly. the take no prisoners. You're the feisty young cop with something to prove.
Right.
You're gonna shake it up.
Right. Yeah. Dan Wood and I are in our own buddy cop story. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad that came up actually, because that's a topic I talk to people about, is pricing and how it can get a little weird. But Dreams of the Eden, that's got a fairly normal price on it. I guess that one's okay.
Give us time. We'll find something to do to it.
We'll screw it up. Yeah, you guys can screw that up. No, I'm just kidding. So your these are cool. Now, how well is the series doing?
Fairly well, I think. What surprised me, when I first came out with it, I really had no platform at all, and with Solaris, they are a really good non-Big Five publisher. They're in the same tier with Angry Robot and Galanx and some of these others that are paying professional wages to the authors, but they really don't have the marketing clout of Macmillan or Tor or any of those.
Right.
So on the one hand, I mean, I didn't get a huge, giant, book blitz or anything like that. The one that I tried to make for myself was kind of adorably awkward in the way that most kindergarten drawings are. But what I've been really pleased with is that the sales, if you look at my Amazon sales graph, it's a little heartbeat. It's a little pulse that's been holding pretty steady for 2 years now.
Right.
And that's one I would like to increase the heart rate, definitely.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy that the interest has held steady or slightly increased over this couple of years, and I'm hoping that with the third book out in the series, all the people who don't start a series before it's complete will finally be comfortable. Go ahead and try out the first book.
Yeah. How many books are you aiming for?
This is just 3. I just made it a trilogy.
Okay.
So this Dreams of the Eaten will be the end of the story because I've seen what happens to authors who have 13-volume epic tomes, and I don't have the beard for that.
Yeah.
I
always had trouble with that too. I've started a couple of series with the intention of it being sort of I'm going to write 20 books in this series, and then it became 10, and now it's like I like stories that end in 3. I think.
Yeah.
Because it's a good it's that 3-act structure really. I mean it's very natural.
Well, right, and you can do bigger, like certainly the Harry Potter series was very successful. I mean, it's certainly possible to have a bigger series, a bigger story than 3 books.
Right.
But one of the things I really liked about Pratchett's Discworld is that he made this big giant sandbox for himself that he did spend most of his career playing in, but he created so many different access points for it. You could literally pick up any single one of his books and jump into that world and then pick and choose which ones you want to read next.
Yeah.
You don't have to follow it in strict linear order from book 1 to book 11.
Yeah, that is good because I mean, and like you say, it's a universe. I mean, you can write, and I've branched out personally in at least my Citadel universe to do something like that. I released a novella that was called Colony Girl for anyone taking notes, but it's the same universe, the same rules, but completely different characters, nothing to do with the mainline story. And I think that's actually a smart way to play it. So that's how you're going to do this? Are you planning to write some like sideline novels connected to this?
Yeah, I'm actually, my next project, I would like to write in the same world with a different set of characters, and I'm thinking about actually doing kind of a YA fantasy version of True Grit, if you've seen or read that. Like a girl and her salt giant. I just think that would be really cool.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I want that book to be written.
Okay, well, my ulterior motive in writing it is because I'm seeing what the YA authors have going on, and it is blowing the pants off of everything that the traditional sci-fi fantasy community is doing, and I want to be part of that. I want unfettered access to minors.
Right.
I think that would be terrific.
You're essentially you're talking about writing to market, basically. I mean, you're talking about you've seen an exploding market, and you think you can get into that. That's cool.
Well, and I mean, I really I think that what was China Miéville, right? He said that his goal was to write a book in every genre.
Right.
I think that'd be pretty cool. And you can do honestly, science fiction and fantasy. One of the only rules is that it didn't happen. So we can have mysteries inside that umbrella, and we can have young adult books and romances and heists and thrillers and everything under the sun can fit here.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. I mean, having switched genres a couple of times now, it's interesting that people are very hung up on these, like, I don't know, these posts. We got everything in sci-fi has to fit exactly this way, and yet when you look at the offerings out there, there's so much variety. Mm-hmm. There's so much more out there than people think. But when you say science fiction, people automatically think of spaceships and lasers and robots and aliens and that sort of thing, and it kind of ruins their. They develop an expectation, and therefore they don't try the work sometimes. You find
Right.
that?
Yes, I was lucky enough to be to attend a panel where Joe Walton was speaking, and I am over the moon for Joe Walton. And someone in the audience stood up and they asked her. They said, "Well, I've got this book, and I'm not sure if it's science fiction or fantasy." And she said, "All right, well, are there spaceships?" And he said, "No." Not exactly. And she said, "Well, is there a holy grail?" And he said, "Yeah, kinda." And she says, "Okay, it's fantasy."
Okay.
And
All right.
it's funny how not only we get pigeonholed, but we pigeonhole ourselves, like you're saying.
Yeah, it's true, and that's unfortunate, and that's one of the reasons why I switched to thrillers, because it's in the end, I can make a thriller. Basically it's the same science fiction and or fantasy story I would have written anyway, with a different label and a slightly different set of rules. I think books like that have to be more contemporary, but not always. I mean, there's some futuristic thrillers out there. So you've got this series now, and you're about to round it off. You've finished it basically because it's a trilogy. So where are you going from here?
Well, I would like to do more of, like I said, I think I've got an outline for that YA fantasy. I'm going to submit that to my agent and see what she says. I think I would really also like, to become a hybrid author. I've actually gotten permission from Solaris. I asked them, okay, if I set a novel in the same world with some of the same characters for this, as we have in this trilogy, and self-published it, as kind of like a murder mystery type of thing, to keep people entertained on the long wait to book 3, would you be cool with that? And they said, not only are we cool with that, but we'll help you promote it. And
nice.
I think that having a smaller story, a self-contained one-shot, possibly even a novella, and something that's kind of a gateway drug for the big story, the big trilogy, I think that would be really cool. And I'd like to try. I've heard a lot of good things about independent publishing from both sides of the aisle, and I think that's something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, and what's very cool about them being open to that, it shows some savvy, because frankly, if you let's say you write the novella you're talking about, right? And it's a mystery. It's set in the same world. Now, what happens is the readers discover you as an author through that book, and then you can put a CTA in that book that points to the stuff published by Solaris, and there's no downside for you. Like it just benefits them for you to have little, bits of work floating around out there that that gather people up and funnel them toward the rest of your work. So I think that's a great idea.
Right. My dad was he was a kind of a scruffy Atticus Finch type lawyer for the longest time. Yeah. And he told me he always wanted us to go to law school. Neither of us did. Yeah. But he said that he really wanted us to have the ability to support ourselves and hang out our own shingle, even if we never wanted to or needed to. Right. Because he said it's important that you be able to have a job where you don't always have to ask your boss, can I leave early today? I need to go get a haircut. And it seems to me like an independently published book is that same version. You don't need to ask permission to put a CTA in the back. You don't need to ask permission to make it part of a collaborative box set or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the strength. I mean, there are several downsides to indie publishing, of course. I mean, and the biggest was always marketing, but frankly, my experience with the traditional world is that you don't get much marketing there either. It's still on your shoulders, Yeah. Is that your experience as well?
Well, I tell you, for the longest time, when you get a book deal, you kind of look around at the other authors who have books coming out at the same time you do, who are members of your cohort, so to speak. Yeah. And I remember being super insanely jealous of the ones who had Big Five publishing deals, because it looked like that, they were getting the best, they were getting reviews in Locus and Kirkus and all this fancy stuff, and one or two of them blew up, but it made me the rest of them, the 98%, made me realize that those guys aren't getting any marketing dollars either.
Right.
You know, it's not just me with my lovable underdog frat house publisher. It's everybody. It's almost everybody.
Right.
And I'm very happy that you know. So if the choice is get no marketing dollars and be traditionally published, or get no marketing dollars and be independently published, I'm very happy that I chose a publisher who really saw, you know, that they let me publish it according to my own vision. I didn't get raked over the coals with edits.
Right.
So they gave me a great book with a great cover. It is exactly the story I wanted to tell as I wanted to tell it. I've really come to realize in the last year or two just how lucky I am to be with them.
Yeah, that is it. That's rare, actually, to have a publisher that's forward thinking, I guess. So
yeah,
I'll be anxious to see how things go then if you do kind of dip your toes in the indie author pond, because you know that's where I am and that's where DL is, and you know we're seeing some success there. So I'll be watching closely.
Oh, good. That's not that's not creepy at all, right? Just so you know, if you want material for your shrine to me, the garbage goes out on Tuesday nights.
You got it. I already knew that. I already knew that.
Of course you did. What am I saying?
Cool, very cool. So you're where do you live, by the way? You live in Dallas? I think we've talked about this. Yeah.
Just in Uptown.
Yeah, Dallas is an interesting. I've only been there a couple of times, but it's interesting. The last time I was there, I was not having a good time because we were driving the RV and everything was under construction and there were storms. It was not a good day for me.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not. I don't hold you personally responsible, but
well, this is one of those cities that you look at it and you're like, okay, we're not on a river.
Yeah.
We're not on the coast. Why did this happen here? Like, so there's a big flat expanse that you can put a city on and it will not get immediately wiped off the map.
Right.
And I suppose it's better than Houston because at least it's not in a swamp.
Yeah.
But it's hard to justify Dallas. I love it to death, but it's hard to explain it.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we come across little towns like that all the time when we're traveling too. Towns, not cities. You know, the city is a little different, but you know, you kind of wonder, like, how the heck, what is the industry that keeps people living in this place? Now, we know what it is in Dallas. It's a couple of things, really, but, you know, these little towns sort of scattered throughout the world, it's like, what do people do for a living here? There's nothing within 100 miles of here. It's not farming, so. One of your marketing approaches is to do a lot of conferences, and you're going to some pretty soon, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
What do you? What's your strategy with that? I mean, how do you manage it all? That's one of the things I'm having trouble with. It's like there's a million conferences. Which ones do I pick? You know, how do I narrow down the best ones for me, etc.?
Oh yeah. Well, a very good friend of mine. Her name is Pavlina. She's kind of she's sort of a marketing She doesn't work with books necessarily, but she works in the financial sector. And she says, she drew me this thing. Have you heard of like 4-quadrant marketing?
Yeah, I think so. If it's the same thing, I think I'm familiar with it.
Okay.
Go ahead and break it down.
And this may be different than what you've heard of. Okay. But she's like, okay, so if you imagine a graph with an X and a Y axis, and the X is, correlations with your subject. So for me, if that's Westerns and fantasy, then that's, science fiction and fantasy conventions, women writing the West, that's all that sort of thing. And then the Y-axis is your, your correlations of place. Yeah. Like I have deep connections in Texas. I have deep connections in the Pacific Northwest. I have deep connections in one tiny town called Bowling Green up in Ohio. Mm-hmm. I have a network of couches to crash on. So she says, what you want to do is look for the convergence of those things. Look for topics. Look for events that are happening in places where you already have some kind of connection. What you don't want is to go to a convention, for example, like for me, I shouldn't go to some random convention in Virginia where I know absolutely no one.
Yeah.
I have no toehold there yet. And it doesn't mean I won't get one, but until I meet someone at a conference or convention who's like, oh yeah, you should come over to, LibertyCon, or you should come over to this and this. I work with them. I'm on their staff. You can crash at my place, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to try to avoid starting from zero as often as you can.
Okay, that makes a great deal of sense, actually. And I have seen something similar to that, so it's probably around the same thing. So, how do you get the toeholds then? How are you finding those connections?
Oh, well, because you and I are fortunate enough to work in science fiction and fantasy, we do have a really big convention culture. I'm not really sure what other genres do about this, by the way. I'm sure all of them have something. Like the romance writers have RT and, that sort of thing. Thriller people have Thriller Fest. But sci-fi fantasy people really have the con culture going on. So if you start with the ones in your own backyard and start volunteering there, which is huge, start, applying to be a panelist there, start getting to know the people who run those conventions are going to draw in people who are from out of town, who have their conventions and their cons. And that's how you start at FenCon in Dallas, and then you make friends with somebody who works up at SoonerCon in Oklahoma City, and you know somebody else who says, oh, you totally have to go to Comic Palooza in Houston. Yeah. And that you the more you go, the more you find out from other people what is good right now. What should I connect to?
Right. Yeah, and that aspect of networking is something that I think a lot of authors struggle with, but just because most are introverts or, thinking in terms of who can I connect with and how can they help me. It's not something that a lot of authors are not that they're not capable of doing it, but they're comfortable doing, I guess.
Right. Well, definitely.
You don't seem to have that trouble though.
Well, I'm what I call a digital introvert. Which is I will hang out and socialize with people in person all day long, all weekend long, and just feel like $1,000,000. I mean, I'll cry blood when I get home and I am exhausted, just catastrophically tired. But it just feels to me like everything in our bodies and brains is optimized for huddling around the metaphorical campfire, chewing the metaphorical fat. Yeah. And I cannot get that. I just have the worst time trying to do anything online because I can't. I guess when you're really a people person, you're relying on body language and eye contact and tone of voice to tell you how interested the other person is in what you're saying. And you don't have that on the internet. I feel like I'm flying blind on Twitter and Facebook and everything else. If I had a bucket to catch every tear I have cried over Twitter, it would be full. And I think that a lot of introverts actually do better that way. It's easier to just stay home and be in your quiet space and communicate just through your keyboard, where you can kind of control the interaction a little bit more.
Well, as writers, of course, that's one of the things that I guess I came to kind of gradually, although I should have realized it right away. But I interact very well digitally, but over the years I've learned how to be very social. And now some people probably think I'm just a loudmouth that, wants attention, but I didn't start off that way.
I cultivated this megalomania.
That's exactly right. So, frankly, the idea, just talking about the sort of conference circuit makes me tired. So maybe that's a sign.
If you need somebody to go be Kevin on your behalf, just let me know. My rates are very reasonable. Well, I can do a good Kevin.
Here's what it comes down to. I am very good at actually being at the events. I am terrible at arranging the whole being at the event. So, which is a problem considering that's part of my job at Draft Digital now. So I may have to outsource that. My wife is very good at it. That's why we're a good team. She handles all the details of that stuff. But she gets so busy she can't do it either. So.
Yes. No, you're right. That's a whole separate skill set.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And how do you manage it? How personally?
Well, for one thing, it does help. Speaking of your wife, my husband really does travel and logistics very well. He's originally from Scotland in the UK, and he goes over there regularly for work. And he goes to, he's been to China, Slovakia. He's maybe going to go back down to Brazil this year. He does a comparative load of travel within countries as well as between countries, and he is an expert, as most Americans are not, in things like public transit. And, well, if my flight gets in at this time, how long is it going to take me to get the bus? And then where's the best hotel I can stay at that's going to be within walking distance to a tube station so I can still get to work on the cheap?
Yeah.
All that stuff, and that fires him up. He loves that efficiency, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes he helps me with that, but even when he doesn't, I've kind of learned at his elbow about how to, what are the best sites for looking up the travel arrangements, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it does help when you know a lot of people who go to conventions, because then you can just, share a hotel room on the cheap or sleep on the floor or whatever.
Yeah. And the hotels are always the most expensive part of all that.
Yeah.
That's why we got an RV.
Exactly. I think you're really ahead of the curve on this one, buddy.
Yeah, man. That's what every author needs, an RV. That's just that's the rule now.
I think the hardest thing to intuit is, when do I need to apply for a conference or a convention?
Yeah.
Because they vary so widely. Like some of the conferences are booking an entire year out, and if you don't have your application in for the next year before this year's conference happens, you're out on your ear.
Yeah.
And other, especially smaller regional conventions, they're not really going to think about programming until 3 months out.
Right.
So just developing your calendar of, when do I check on X? When do I check on Y?
Right.
That's probably the longest road to hoe.
Yeah, I could see that, and I always forget, everything's so on demand in my life now that when there's something I have to pre-plan, it always goes awry for me, because I'm like, what do you mean I can't just, buy my air ticket right here at the
at the gate,
or showing up at a hotel and asking if there's a room. That's the kind of guy I end up being. So we're at 30 minutes, and there's so many things. I mean, before you and I even set a date for this chat, you had like 4 or 5 different things that you could have talked about, and I think we covered some of them, but not all of them. But I think I've done you a disservice. We're gonna have to get you back on and talk about more of this, because I'm very interested in everything you're doing to promote these 3 books that you have here. The whole conference circuit thing is something I'm dipping my toes into, so that led the conversation.
Well, and honestly, dude, I always enjoy talking to people like you, and especially to you, as a person who you're promoting yourself, but you are also making space for other people.
Right.
And you're doing that really passionately, and with you've really thrown a whole lot of your time and energy into doing that. And there are a million people in the world who want to take up space on the bestseller list, on the panelist lineup, on your bookshelf, on whatever. But it is a rare breed who have genuine enthusiasm for making space for other people to occupy. I just think that's really cool, and I'm very glad to see it paying off for you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And that is a goal and a passion of mine. So you're out there, and you're kind of leading the charge in a few things yourself, because you've got the all the DFW conference stuff that you're doing. You want to talk about that real quick?
Oh, sure, yeah. The DFW Writers Conference is, and we have tested this, the best in the Southwest for writers' conferences, as long as you're willing to accept Texas is part of the Southwest.
Very good.
But it's a program that originally developed from the DFW Writers Workshop, which is one of the oldest and largest writers groups here in North Texas. We've got like 180 active members. I think usually about 40 to 60 will show up on any average Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And so the conference is basically, I don't know, I tend to think of it as like Disneyland, Hogwarts, Burning Man, Carnival Prom, but, for writers.
Okay.
And it's just, that's where I got my agent. That's where I learned to love, like in-person social events. I didn't think I ever would. And it's one that has yielded just tremendous benefit for a lot of writers I know. Yeah. And it's something that I really want to try to, share with the world. I think a lot of times as writers, we end up just stuck in our little sweaty, lightless word holes, and it's hard sometimes to have the wherewithal to break out of that and go find a community.
Yeah.
But we do need that. This what we're doing is sort of fundamentally unhealthy, and
Yeah.
like I don't know, dude. This whole thing about I'm gonna write this story that comes from the very darkest pits of my soul. Then I'm going to put it out for everyone to see and judge and, pass judgment on. And I'm not allowed to respond if they say anything negative about it.
Right.
I'm just going to stand out there and take pot shots from the entire world.
Yeah.
Or stare into the yawning void of its indifference.
Which is
and so,
a little more common.
yeah. And so that's basically like, I don't know, I think of it like we think about ballet dancers when they go up on point, like on their toes.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can do that, but that's not what the foot is designed for. It's not really a healthy thing to do. And if you're going to do it, it becomes hugely important for you to have a green room space backstage where you can take off your pretty slippers, compare corns, and get advice from other people who are doing the same thing you are about, hey, does this smell funky to you? I think my toe's falling off. What do I do?
Very interesting analogy.
Thanks. I've been called intriguing yet disgusting.
There you go.
But yeah, so that, to me, that space can take many forms. The DFW Writers Conference is one of my favorite, but obviously you can have, just like you have here, you can have an online community, in-person communities, virtual communities.
Yep.
I think really the important thing is that we're not trying to solo this, because it's not made for one person alone.
Yeah, and it takes a while, I think, it took a while for me, but it takes a while for some authors to kind of come around to that, because you do think of writing as a solo activity.
Yeah,
and it is. It is. But there's a social component to writing that people forget about. It's an interaction, and you need support if you're going to be creating something that's going in front of the eyes of any critical group. Then you need a nice support network behind you to keep you from wanting to kill yourself with every bad review. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we're at the end of our time, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap us up. But I really appreciate you being on, Tex. I've enjoyed knowing you. I'm glad you decided to follow up and contact me. I'm gonna have to thank DL for the recommendation.
Oh, I am looking forward to plotting world domination with you.
Very good. All right. Well, now I want to get into the Dallas Writers Conference, though. So you're gonna have to help me. You're my contact.
This is about sharing spaces, man.
Exactly.
That's right. That's what we're here to do.
Very cool. And now I might be able to come in the capacity of Draft to Digital, too. That might be good.
Oh, that would be really cool. Promise you'll bring your bow tie.
Oh, absolutely. I hardly leave home without it these days. I carry a spare in my bag. Although it gets a little hot in Texas to wear a bow tie, honestly. So I sometimes I trim.
Well,
anyway.
The shirt is optional, but the bow tie is not.
Exactly. There you go. All right. For everybody who did not fall over unconscious from that visual image, go ahead and go check out Tex's website at thetexfiles.com. That's TEXfiles.com. And you can find her on Facebook. I'll have links to everything Tex related in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. Tex, I appreciate you being on. It's a lot of fun talking to you, so we're going to have to do it again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kevin. I'm really looking forward to it.
You got it. Everybody else, stay tuned, and I'll probably have a few words after this little musical interlude. And what do you know? I do. I do have a few words after that brief musical interlude. So, it's funny. When I established the format of this show 2 years ago. Actually, if you listen to the very first episode, I had a whole other format in mind. I was going to do a news minute. I was going to do a lot of stuff that ultimately would have led to more work for me, which is why it quickly disappeared. And now maybe one day I'll do that again, revamp that whole thing. I wouldn't mind giving some sort of industry news, but here's what's tough about that. Because of the format of the show, and because I'm not on a specific topic all the time, such as writing or publishing. I don't want to constantly give people news from that industry when some of my listeners may be tuning in for other reasons. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to kind of up your game as an entrepreneur, you may not care all that much about publishing and publishing news. So I could probably still do this with like a variety of news sources, I guess. I don't know. That's me thinking out loud on the air, but and I'll stop doing that. But the point there is when I built the show initially, I had only a vague notion of how I wanted it to go together. And I had some ideas. I was going to do some general good practice stuff from radio, from my radio days. And I still do a lot of that. But I was very concerned. These are the behind the scenes notes, by the way. But when I first started, I was very concerned about sound quality, which I should be. Anyone who does any sort of broadcasting should be. But I was very concerned about sort of outside noise. So anytime I started recording and someone did something like for example, the lawn guys would show up back then, it would really irritate me. I'd stop the show, cuss a lot, which never made it on air, but and then I'd wait until those guys were gone, or at least out of range, and I would, close things up again and do it again. I remember one time, literally as I started recording, the lawn guy comes to the house, starts a weed eater directly in front of the room that I used as my studio, and stayed there. And it turned out he was having a conversation with somebody, one of my neighbors, and had left the machine running the whole time. But he's having this long conversation while I'm patiently, not so patiently, we're waiting for him to move on so I can record. So I had actually, at that point, grabbed an old mattress and leaned it up against the window, took some heavy blankets and quilts, and hung them over the door of the studio, wedged that closed, did everything I could to try to drown out sound so that I could record. And those are extremes I don't go to now. If you listen to the show, you know that I don't, the lawn guys start up and I'm sort of eye rolling and saying, okay, they're here, they're doing their thing. That's just what the show does every now and then. And maybe that annoys people. I don't know. I don't know. But here's what I've come to in this. I think of this as the content is more important than the quality. The content itself, the content you're getting. So if I'm interviewing someone and we're having a conversation and the lawn guys show up, or some other noise is happening outside, a dog starts whining or whatever, I'm going to do my best to keep rolling, partly because I don't want to have to edit. True confession. I don't want to have to go back and splice. Although I have. If you listen to the interview I did with the art guys, that's a splice of dozens of different clips because we just kept losing the call. Things kept happening. I had to edit the whole thing together piece by piece. And I actually didn't mind doing that. It wasn't such a big deal. And I have edited podcasts in the past, things I've done for clients, for example, I've edited and cleaned up. So there's not really a problem with doing that. The real reason, the more pointed reason, is that I feel like there's an authenticity to the conversations that I have with people. These are life. These are, it's not just me interviewing someone officially for this program. It's also me having a conversation and forming a bond with this person. And that's the way it always feels to me. And that's the way it feels to them too. When I am done with these interviews, you'd be very surprised, I think, how often the guests will say to me, that was a great interview. I had so much fun. It was so much different so different from what I expected. It was very much like just having a conversation. And that's the point. That's the point of the whole thing. I'm trying to bring you something real. I don't script questions in advance. I used to. When I first started, I used to jot down 5 or 6 questions that I wanted to ask. And then as I'm going through the interview and a question occurred to me, I would try to quickly type it up so that I could remember to ask it, so that I always had the conversation moving. And that was very stressful. And somewhere along the way, I just decided that it was better to just listen. Listen. I mean, that's if you want to know the key to success in something like this, in anything really, but in podcasting in particular, And anytime you're interacting with other humans, listening is the primary skill. And I have traditionally not been a very good listener, but the Wordslinger podcast has helped me develop that as a better skill than I had before. And as I analyze the show and what it's done for me and what it means to me over the past 2 years, that's something I can carry away with me. That's a lesson that I now realize I can. Not only have I learned, but I can learn better. So see, even the anniversary episode has something to teach me. And make no mistake, this is about teaching Kevin. Okay, this whole show is about teaching Kevin, and I'm sharing what I learned with you because I care about you and I want you to succeed. But the point, honestly, from the beginning has been, what can Kevin learn from these guests and from doing this show? And in that, I think I've been very successful. More behind the scenes. I mean, I'm going to take the full hour today because I wanted to explore as much as I could about what the Wordslinger podcast means, what it means to me, at least. I'd love to hear what it means to you. In fact, please tell me, email me. Go to wordslingerpodcast.com. You can email me. Of course, you can call me. You can call 281-809-WORD, 281-809-9673, where you can leave me a voicemail. Oh, sorry about that. I bumped you there. Where you can leave me a voicemail and tell me exactly what you think of the show, what it means to you. I'd love to hear some of the lessons you have pulled from the show. Like what's the most important thing you've ever learned from one of my guests on this show? So please do that. I would love to hear that. You can write that in the reviews too. If you go to iTunes and look for Wordslinger and write a review, I would love to hear what you're gaining. I think other potential listeners would also love to hear that. So thank you for that. More behind the scenes. The trick of this show is that I record these episodes and I record the interviews in advance. I do, I have people approach me, so I'm hardly ever without a guest. I've always got someone lined up, and I generally do 2 or 3 interviews a week. I have a scheduling service I use, and I send the link out so that they can actually go pick a date and time that works for them, because I have a very flexible schedule, so that works. And when we have the interview on the day of, I use Skype. I use a recording plugin called Call Recorder from a company called Ecamm, ECAMM. And I record the episode. It gets recorded as a QuickTime movie, actually, which I export as audio only. And then I keep notes I use the stickies. In Apple's, Apple has this little program called Stickies, which are sticky notes, like Post-it notes. And I take I take the information from the booking software, copy and paste that into a sticky note, clean it up a little, and I have little blocks in there. Like, okay, so here's the bio, here's the show topic, here's the all their contact information that actually goes up top. If I have the person's name and a title. So if they're an author, I say author of whatever their book happens to be. If they're the founder of something, founder of company X, that sort of thing. And then I have these sections I call quotes, notes, and mentions. Notes has more or less gone away. Notes was where I was jotting down questions as I thought of them. And these days, I don't necessarily have to do that. I'm pretty good about remembering a question as it occurs to me. But also, I want these things to be much more spontaneous, so I tend to not prepare any questions in advance. And I don't tend to have lulls either, because as I'm listening, I have plenty of material to ask about and talk about. But I do try to grab a quote in the middle of the conversation. If I hear something that strikes me as something quotable, I jot that down. And if you ever see the podcast on the website, you'll see the interview cards there, the posts themselves. You'll see the quote that I choose embedded in the image for that episode. And that becomes shareable on and now I'm behind on this. I need to catch up. I've slacked off, but that quote and that embedded in that image becomes something I share on social media, and I put it in. I use Social Jukebox, which was made by a former guest of mine, a former guest. But I use Social Jukebox, and I put that card in, and let it just bounce around out there with the episode's URL so that people can discover the show on social media. I am behind on that. I need to get back on track with that. That's the setup. And then as I do the interview, if they mention something, I put it in the mentions section so that when I do their interview card on the website, the show notes on the website, I've got all that information right there ready to go. So that's the secret sauce. That's what's going on behind the scenes. I host the show on Squarespace, which is where I host my website. I should one day, I have a URL that points to a specific page on my personal website. I thought about just building a separate site for Wordslinger Podcast, but I kind of like having it all there. I like having everything in one place because then you can discover the rest of my work. Because the podcast is it's part of me. It's not all of me. So I want people to see that there's more going on. That I have, 30 plus fiction books out there, and that I have some resources they can go and check out and make purchases and that sort of thing. So that's what it is. Now, the guests, I do approach people from time to time, but for the most part, they approach me. I have several people who are out there kind of plugging away for me, and one of whom is actually going to be on the show in a few weeks, and her name is Rachel. She's she does PR. She actually brings me a lot of guests. So thank you, Rachel. Anyway, we're past the hour now, but I thought it would be cool to kind of peel back the curtain a little and let you see some of what goes on here, how I handle everything. There is the whole, there's a lot of technical details that could go into all this, but for the most part, the show is about connecting with people, listening to them, having a genuine conversation with them, with no agenda in mind other than this, having this talk. That's it. I don't go into any given interview thinking, you know what, I want to dig into this person's psyche, find out how they're marketing their work so that I can replicate it. I will often ask things about that sort of topic so that I can learn from it, but that the agenda is, what's your story? And that's it. So what's your story? I would love to hear your story. And of course, you can tell me that story at wordslingerpodcast.com and call me at 281-809-WORD. That's 281-809-9673. I would love to hear your story. How have you been doing for the past 2 years? And especially if Wordslinger Podcast has had any positive impact on your life, I desperately want to hear that because that makes all this worth it. So that's it for today. That's it for this year. No, actually, I've got more episodes coming up, so don't worry. But thank you for being a part of something that is so meaningful in my life. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that and how grateful I am. This has been a rock and roll ride for me for the past 2 years. All the great things that are happening in my life today, I can actually trace to this podcast. So I am so dumbfounded by it and so stupid appreciative of it. So thank you for being a part of it. Tune in. We got a whole year more to go before we get to the next anniversary episode. And I've got some great interviews already in the can and waiting to be tuned up and keyed up and ready for you to listen to. So stick around, and thank you for being a part of something so meaningful in my life. God bless. I'll see you next time.
Wordslinger.